Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by my co-host Bryan Smith. Bryan, how's it going, man?
It's going good. I am excited. We got a week where we have a guy that has graduated from our podcast into the major leagues with massive success, which is an exciting thing for this show, I think.
Yeah, we got a few players that we need to talk about today. Jordan Wicks is obviously one of them. Before we get into this, a little non-baseball talk for you. Have you done any fantasy football drafts yet this year?
I have not. We're gonna have one at work that's coming up soon, but I have not dove deep. I've done a English Premier League fantasy draft.
Oh,
That's as far as I've gone this month so far.
dude, I would not do that very well. I couldn't name maybe a single player, and I'm just not a soccer guy. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
really
I
not.
just got into it the last couple of years with my son, and so we did it together. It was a good time,
That's
but
pretty sweet.
yeah,
Are you just in the one football league then?
yes,
Okay, yeah, yeah. I got all both my drafts are Labor Day weekend. It's the big weekend. It's Labor Day weekend. It's draft weekend. So
nice.
got it coming up. But all right, we'll get into some prospects here. Like you said, we'll talk about Jordan Wicks a little bit in this episode. We got a few more players. We'll talk about Matt Shaw and his promotion up to Double A. We'll talk about Alexander Canario and his hot streak. Between Wicks and Canario, I feel like we've talked about those guys quite a bit, so we won't linger on them too awful much. But Jefferson Rojas is staying absolutely on fire recently. As are Brian Kalmer and Jonathon Long, which are two draft picks this year that we'll get into a little bit, and then we'll wrap things up with a little Pedro Ramirez talk. So this
Just
is
success as far as the eye can see in this system, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is an episode with a lot of like, I don't know, guys that are just on fire, and it's
Yep.
like it's nice to. I know that listening to the CHGO guys and listening to Brendan Miller and Corey Friedman do their thing over there, they were talking on this week's episode that they did about how just a couple months ago that it felt like they had a lot of big asks for this organization, right? A couple months ago, they were saying
Yeah.
so many things have to go right at the major league level to compete. So many more things need to have a real uptick in the farm system, whether that's Kevin Alcantara at the time really turning things around, or PCA taking off, or Cade Horton being an absolute superstar. And across the board, like all of those things have happened. Like literally every
Yeah.
single one of those things are happening, and that's fun.
Yep. Yeah, I mean this time of the year especially we're seeing just offense everywhere in the system. Like that's really jumped out. The pitching maybe lagging behind a little bit these couple weeks, but there's so much with the bats to talk about that we're going to keep listeners pretty busy here for the next 40 minutes, I imagine.
Yeah, so let's dig into Jordan Wicks and the pitcher because he's really the only. This is the only part of pitching that we're going to talk about today,
Yeah.
and it's our last chance to really talk about him, right? Because my full expectation is that he is up in the big leagues for good. He'll finish off the year there this year. He'll probably make the team out of spring training next year. Like we don't get to talk about Jordan Wicks more, so let's talk about him today. What an incredible start! Like what an incredible start that was the other day in on Saturday, his major league debut. He went out there through 5 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, 9 strikeouts, 1 walk, which is obviously a terrific line in itself. But it's the fact that he went out there, gave up the home run to the first batter he faced, then gave up the line drive single, then walked a guy, then got down 2-0. Like it just looked like it was going to be an awful first outing for him. And in Jordan Wicks fashion, if I've ever seen it, he locked it in, retired the last 15 batters he faced, and that's that bulldog mentality we've been talking about. Whether it's the last episode with me and Alex Cohen, or the last episode I think with me and you, we talked about it a little bit. And going back to our interview with Jordan Wicks earlier in this offseason, it's like he was exactly what we expected him to be at the major league level in one start.
Yeah, I mean, from the two times that I've talked to Jordan in podcasts, the thing that jumps out the most to me is just like he has sort of like a burning self-belief that just comes across, and it doesn't come across in like a cocky, arrogant way. It's just like in a confident, just like you sort of believe him when he just the way that he talks about himself and his game, that like he believes he belongs in every game that he's ever pitched in. He pitched at a non-powerhouse Big 12 school and was an All-American and, was never intimidated in a start against Texas or Oklahoma or, any of the big schools in that conference. And then just like getting to the major league level, having your face punched a little bit right out of the gate. Also sort of that kind of red ass pitcher who's just going to get angry by hitters hitting him hard and then to shove like he did down the end. It's just a perfect encapsulation of who he is, like as a person, even more than a pitcher, I think.
It's kind of funny to me so after he got down 2-0 on that fourth batter he faced in the first inning, Tommy Hotovy came out for a mound visit, and it was after that mound visit that he really locked it in. And it's funny to me because like Jordan Wicks he shouts to me as that guy that right now, as he's continuing to just take everything in and learn as much as he possibly can, like that is awesome. Like that mound visit is like perfect for him. But I'm also picturing in 8 years when Jordan Wicks is resembling more of John Lackey and John Lester, and that mound visit would be an absolute nightmare. Right, like it would be Jordan Wicks. Like, I know what I need to do. Like,
Right.
I'm a good pitcher, but also like I'm a smart guy, and I know what I need to do to lock it in. Like, get away from me, Tommy Hotovy. I can't stand you. Like it's
the pitching coach will be nervous walking out there.
exactly. And so like that, it was just funny that in that first outing, that's what we got. So there's going to be a real nice juxtaposition of that in his first outing versus him in his 8th year on the Chicago Cubs down the road.
Remind me, did you go to his start in Peoria last year?
Yeah, it was his final start of his time in South Bend, or playing for South Bend before he got called up to Tennessee, and it was that outing in Peoria that was like chef's kiss. Like,
And
beautiful.
honestly, like that start specifically reminded me so much of the Peoria start, because
Yeah.
like the thing that dominated in that Peoria start, I remember writing about it, was like, he showed a good slider. His fastball was well located, but his changeup just freaking dominated those Peoria hitters. I think if I'm remembering right, they swung and missed. Like every swing at a changeup was a whiff. That was almost the case with the Pirates. So
I remember that outing specifically. So I was up in the booth with BK for a couple, or for an inning or so, and I remember talking to him. I was like, man, like we're looking at like some real high quality Jordan Wicks here, and it was like the changeup was back. Because as we talked with him this past offseason, like that was a matter of last year where he was reincorporating the changeup more as his dominant offering. Where like in the beginning of the year, he was working on how to incorporate the cutter, the slider, the curveball, stuff like that.
Yep.
And that starting against Peoria was just all right. Let me let this changeup ride,
Yeah.
and it was beautiful. And you're right, it is a lot like what we saw from him last night or on Saturday night.
Yeah, it would be really cool if the Cubs keep going with that pitch mix where it's like change up first, fastball plays off that. I mean, he didn't even really throw the slider against the Pirates, which is pretty wild. So yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, he's going to have his growing pains. The hitters are going to adjust. They're going to be able to, there are going to be teams that just feast on that changeup a lot more than the Pirates could. So it's not going to not every start's going to feel like this one did, but just like as fans of Jordan Wicks, just knowing him and his family got to experience that just like life moment. That's reaffirming stuff for those of us that really root for that guy.
And it's honestly, it's one of my favorite things about a guy getting called up to the majors is going on Instagram and seeing all his teammates in the minor league system, and seeing all of them like just giving shout outs to Jordan Wicks or whoever it is making their MLB debut, or not even MLB, but any type of promotion, and all those shout outs they're giving, and how much praise they're giving to their teammates. Like that's one of my favorite things. And we saw an awful lot of that with Jordan Wicks. Obviously, his teammates love him, love being around him, love playing by his side. So yeah, I just think that's so cool. I love an MLB debut, but I especially love it when it's a guy that we've had the pleasure of interviewing and all that good stuff.
Totally.
All right. I did want to talk a little bit about what we saw. I didn't mention this right off the gate, but what we saw this past week, where we saw Jordan Wicks go, we saw Javier Assad go, we saw Justin Steele go, and the ramifications of this overhaul of Cubs pitching infrastructure over the past few years, and now we're seeing that at the major league level, and like how awesome that is. I think that like obviously this is more of a major league conversation, but it's worth having here on a Cubs minor league podcast, just because like this is something we've watched from the ground up over the past several years, and it's like it's awesome to see this coming to fruition up at the major league level.
Yeah, I mean, last year, it was really important. There was some statistics that went around, and it was a little different depending on sort of whose numbers you were using. But like the general gist of it was the Cubs had the biggest gain in the average stuff of their minor league pitchers last year from 2021 to 2022 in Major League Baseball. They basically, I think, went from somewhere in the 25 to 30 range to third, if I'm remembering right, in the one that I saw. And it, I think we were telling people like that's a big deal. Like that you're gonna feel that. Like we don't know which pitchers are gonna hit and which pitchers aren't. That can change, but when the general like field of all the guys has been raised to a whole nother level, that's when you start just getting that churn of guys that succeed in the majors, and we're just starting to feel it, and I think we're going to continue to feel it here for next year as well. And it's a good sign for just an organization that could really use some help in that area.
This is a segment that I like to call just reading off my tweets. I tweeted this out yesterday. It was after the Javier Assad start, and people seem to enjoy this. So, of the active arms currently at the major league level for the Cubs, Adbert Alzolay, homegrown; Javier Assad, homegrown; Justin Steele, homegrown; Jordan Wicks, homegrown; Keegan Thompson, homegrown. Then you got Kyle Hendricks and Daniel Palencia, who were acquired when they were in the lowest levels of the minors, basically homegrown. You got Mark Leiter Jr. and Julian Merriweather, who I identified as pitch labbed, right? Like they were thrown in the pitch lab, and they're not what they were with other organizations. And then you got the other guys who Kwas and Wesneski, who were acquired as trade pieces, and then Smiley and Tyone, who were free agent signings. So that's a roster just filled with almost entirely homegrown type players. And it's like that's no joke, dude. Like that's imagine saying that a couple of years ago. Like not even like literally 2 years ago. It's not like 5 years ago. Like literally 2 years ago. This wouldn't have been dreamed of.
Yeah, I think I want to say one of our first few episodes I went on some rant about the pitch lab, and that that it's one of those things that's easy to be a punching bag, easy to make fun of. But what it represents to me more than anything is like the Cubs made an investment in pitching development starting about, I don't know, 5 to 7 years ago even, but they've ramped it up since Carter Hawkins joined the organization. Craig Breslow has a full team of guys. They really believe in sort of segmenting off the pitching side of development and investing in it. And, I imagine that the guys in that office on Waveland are feeling like they're starting to get their money's worth on that investment. Just when they see things like Javier Assad throwing 7 innings of really good baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It's like it's the fact that they are creating an entire pitching staff full of these guys.
Yeah.
Not only like studs, right? Not only Justin Steele examples,
right?
But examples of guys up and down the pitching staff that are making an impact in some way. And it's like,
yeah, getting Cade Horton to the majors, like that's not a huge like win for the development side of an organization. That's like your scout did an awesome job finding an absolute stud. You get Javier Assad to be the guy he is, like your whole organization succeeded at every level along the way there.
Yeah, it's getting the Cade Horton to go from he has that in him. Now let's make it happen. Let's make him a star at the major leagues.
Yeah.
It's taking Javier Assad, and it's like, all right, he's done for at like not even double A, at high A, and now he's pitched 4 consecutive great outings for the Chicago Cubs. It's like you milk every last ounce out of every single one of these players, and man, it's like, and I've used on multiple different occasions the Michael Rucker example. I think I did it on the show, right, where it's like Michael Rucker is a guy who got a lot of innings as a reliever in Chicago. That would not have been the case in every organization, like at all.
Right.
I mean, he was selected in the Rule 5 draft. He was selected by the Baltimore Orioles, and they said,
Yeah.
all right, you can have him back, So I don't know. It's just that's huge for me. That getting value out of as many players as you possibly can it's so valuable.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Keegan Thompson, if he becomes a thing, like that's a whole nother side of it. Now you're taking pitchers that have sort of hit this point of struggling, and if you can get them over the hump, like I don't know, they're almost showing like signs of at multiple levels of the pitching development curve of just the fact that it's a healthy infrastructure, and that's what's going to lead to like an organization having prolonged success more than a crop of players, because as we've seen, like those come and go, but it's sort of the bones of the organization that matter, I think.
I went back and looked, last thing on this, I went back and looked at my write-up of Jordan Wicks after he got drafted.
Yeah, me too.
And I made a point as to like calling out the fact that he was a safe draft, like safe college arm, and how at the time we were still a little bit, as a fan base as a whole, against that type of selection, because we were still coming off of the Paul Richan, Alex Lang, Thomas Hatch era, right?
Yep.
And I think that this is, watching Jordan Wicks make it up to the major leagues and do this is an example of like, this is different now. Now, Jordan Wicks might just be a different guy, right? Entirely. Right. And I know every single individual player is different, but like, it feels like it represents something bigger to me in my eyes. And the fact that like the Cubs took someone that is similar-ish to the Alex Langs and Paul Richans of the world, and they were able to actually make something as a starting pitcher out of this guy. You know what I mean? It feels like it represents more than just like Jordan Wicks coming up and making a start.
That's a good point. That's well said.
All right, let's go from Jordan Wicks, who got the call up and debuted in the major leagues, to a guy who literally about 4 hours prior to us coming on this and recording this on Monday night here, received the call from high A up to double A, and that's Matt Shaw. And man, it's like that is just like Jordan Wicks is super, super fun. This Matt Shaw, like, this is a fun promotion here. Obviously, Matt Shaw was the first round draft pick this year out of Maryland. He got the aggressive promotion up to South Bend to kind of start his full season career. And just like that, literally almost 100 plate appearances later, 100 plate appearances in minor league baseball later, he's up to Double A Tennessee.
Yeah, and I mean, they were 100 plate appearances where he just did not seem particularly challenged, which I think is what the Cubs saw too. And they just, they're making this quick move because they want to challenge him, I think, as soon as possible to start to really like understand what the right development plan for him this offseason and in the next season would be. Like, I don't think anything that was happening in South Bend was going to inform a development plan very specifically. It was going to be like, do more of that. And that was gonna be pretty much the list. And so Double A will allow them to give him some real notes, I think, in a way that clearly the Midwest League was just not providing.
Dude, he just looked so much better. I mean, he did look so much better, but it's not even that. It's just that he looked like way too comfortable, I think is my takeaway. He just looked like he was like, oh yeah, this is what I do. I come to South Bend, I come to high A, and I just hit. It's like, yeah, I mean, I guess you do, but like, it shouldn't be that easy. Like, you shouldn't be doing it like this.
Yeah, I saw somebody on Twitter like saying, "Oh, he really didn't walk very much, though. He only walked 4 times in 89 plate appearances," which, like, speaking, we'll call out that stuff a lot too. But I think the important thing to remember is like he hit 393 there. If a hitter is ever in the type of zone where like they're seeing the ball so well that they can hit 393 over a 20 game stretch, like every hitting coach in baseball would be like, don't worry about walking. Like, just like you're seeing a beach ball, go, keep swinging. So, I almost think that played a role in this too, where the Cubs were like, he's not even needing to get like deep enough in counts to even think about drawing walks. Like he's seeing, the second pitch of an at bat and just cranking it to the gap or to the down the line. And I think they need to see some struggles just to help him.
Yeah, I mean it's the PCA in the first half of the year scenario, just like even more so, right? Where it's like,
Yes.
if you have the ability to hit, like, why walk? Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to tell a guy who's hitting like this to draw more walks? You shouldn't. Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me the most with Matt Shaw was the opposite field power that we saw from him, especially this past week, right? So,
Yeah.
this week, especially the last 3 games that he played in South Bend, he recorded 8 hits. He had 2 homers, a double, and a triple, all in 3 games, which is wild. But he had a homer over the course of his time in South Bend. He had a homer down the right field line. He had a homer to dead center field, like the right center gap. Like, he is showing that opposite field power, and that's something to monitor, because like there's a one thing of having home run power and it being pull side power. Again, like we've seen with PCA, it's another thing to be showing that to the opposite field gap. Like, that's wild. That's legit power.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, when we're talking about, now that he's in Double A, we can start talking about him as a major league prospect and how he fits onto a roster and how he fits in with this organization. And like, if you have oppo gap power, like Wrigley Field is a perfect place to play. I mean, you just want to hit it to the gaps and at Wrigley to sort of maximize your offensive output there. So seems like his game's really well suited for there. Yeah, it's gonna be a really good month for him, I think, and I think we'll be able to see both some ups and downs to talk about that'll be really useful. And he's putting himself in a position to like be loudly banging on the door next year, which is just insane stuff.
Is there anything that he can do this last month of the season in Double A to either make you say, all right, I'm like even way higher than I was prior to him being acquired? Or on the other side of the spectrum, if he really gets out there and struggles, it's like, all right, I need to back off a little bit. Is a month enough to sway you one way or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'll look for is like when I've talked to hitters that have made the jump from high A to double A specifically. I remember Matt Murr was talking about this. Is just like the way that pitchers can locate their breaking stuff, especially in counts where you're not even necessarily expecting breaking balls, is so different when you get to double A. And so, Matt is not only going to be seeing the best breaking balls he's ever seen before, because he didn't, he played at a school that faced solid competition, but not amazing competition in college. So like he's going to see high quality breaking balls, but he's also going to see them executed at a level that he's never seen before. And so that's, I think, what I'll probably cue in on the most is just like, how does he look against right-handed sliders, especially like 2-strike counts, things like that. And the kind of stuff that is really easy for major league pitchers to just do right out of the chute. And if you can't do the stuff that's easy for them, then they're just going to keep doing that. What we're hoping for is that he can beat that sort of basic game plan and then make major league pitchers adjust to him.
I mean, imagine being in the Big Ten and the best competition you're facing is like some guys at Iowa or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited to see him. Like you said, like he's more on the major league prospect radar at this point, because everything after a guy gets drafted, it's like so how much do I take seriously? How much do I like chalk up as he's like riding a high a little bit, But I'd love to see him finish off the year here. I'd love to see him in the Arizona Fall League. I don't know how likely it is now that he's up in Double A, but like I'd love to see just as many at bats from Matt Shaw this year as humanly possible. I'm about that.
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's worth pointing out, like we've complained this year about the Cubs being too conservative with their assignments a little bit. And the fact that they're willing to be this aggressive means that they totally believe that he belongs there. And if they had any doubts, like the way this front office does things is if they had any doubts, he would still be in South Bend. So that means that in this 20-game stretch, he erased any doubts in a player development department that he's an A-ball player anymore. So that's really cool stuff. And I think it speaks to like the fact that he's a real good prospect that we can start to get excited about.
You got him number 3 in the system yet?
No, probably not. But I mean, that's a thing that I think could happen over the month. Like, I mean, he's going to be playing with Owen every day. And so, it's going to be really fun to stack up those two at bats next to each other. And those are two guys that approach an at bat really differently. Owen gets into really deep counts all the time. Matt, is more of like the Nico, first 3 pitches, I'm going to find something type of guy. So, we're going to see the same pitchers against those two very different styles. And I think it will sort of impact my ranking of those two guys come the offseason.
Yeah. All right, let's go to a guy who's in AAA right now. And like I said, we've been talking about him quite a bit recently, so we won't go into too much detail. But the week that Alexander Canario put together this past week must be talked about. Like we've got to talk about this.
Yeah.
This past week in 5 games, he had 11 hits, 4 homers, and 4 doubles. Just an outrageous week. That brings his AAA line up to 287 batting average, on base percentage of 355, slugging of 544. That's 8 home runs in 34 games. Like he is, like we said last week on last week's episode with Alex, like he is all the way back, looking terrific. And I'm amped up. I think that like he has played so well recently that he's played himself into like deserving conversation about a September call up. I don't foresee that happening at all. I get that he's on the 40-man roster. I get that it's a little bit easier, but I don't really see that happening. But just the fact that we're able to have that conversation, it doesn't sound ridiculous, is fun.
Yeah, when he came back, like, I don't think I very much on purpose did not sort of put out my thoughts on how he looked those first couple weeks, mostly because I didn't know how quick things were going to be changing and adjusting. I didn't know if this was the new normal. Like, you just kind of needed to see that play out. But like, I think I can say now, I had real concerns when he came back. Like, he looked different to me in a lot of ways. I think he's still like some of the athleticism doesn't look back, and we'll see what an off season more of work in the weight room and flexibility training and stuff does for that. But like the bat speed looked so slow those first couple weeks, and it had me a little shook in terms of how to think about him moving forward, and that is kind of gone now. I think sort of the swing necessary to succeed in the big leagues is still there, and that's really exciting. There'll be some stuff he's going to have to clean up along the way. I don't think he's quite all the way there yet. I certainly do not think he should be really even considered for a September call up. But I do think that like we can get excited about the upside offensive player that we were getting excited about a year ago.
And the fact that he's putting up these numbers and getting these results without fully being maybe not all the way back in that way. Statistically, he's back. Maybe physically, he's not back. It's just, to me, it felt like almost like a overnight deal, right? Because I was with you early on in his return. I was like, oh, I don't know about this. It was kind of like everything that I was worried about when we were talking about when he was out.
Yeah,
it felt like that was actually happening, and I was like, oh no,
yeah,
like that is not good. And then I swear it just seemed like overnight it was like, all right, now he's just hitting tanks. The bat speed looks back. He's going opposite field. He's leaning back on the home runs, which I'd love to see. It's like it just felt back all of a sudden. I'm really excited to see him get a full off season of, like you said, like the just getting more flexible, all that good stuff, back in the gym a little bit. And I'm excited to see what that full off season workout plan has in store for him when he comes back next year, because that could be really fun.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the reasons I don't think, like, I think he should be with Iowa all the way is he just needs to see, he needs more of those like feedback loops of seeing pitches, like being back in the box again. I think when he really broke out last July, it was because the kind of at bats he was taking had just gotten better and better. He was not only just sort of walking more, but just like swinging at the right pitches, like getting deep into counts and waiting for that one mistake that the pitcher throws on the 5th or 6th pitch of an at bat. That's still not quite there. Like the at bats are shorter. He's hunting a lot more for fastballs and finding them. So I want him to have more experience in AAA. I want him to have more experience since the injury, but the sort of raw foundation of who he is still there. And and that's worth getting excited about. It's worth like keeping him as one of your top 11 prospects in the system for sure. And I think it's something that is going to come up a lot in trade conversations this offseason. Like he's back on other teams' radars too, I'm sure, in terms of like a guy that people would love to have in their organization.
I think I'm not sure that I've seen a player that has been this talked about in terms of Cubs fans as time to trade him when he's been this successful as a prospect.
Yeah.
Like over the I mean, like I think it was last year before the injuries happened. I heard his name a lot. I understood that a little bit more because there was a perceived like overload of too many outfield prospects, whatever the hell that means. But I'm even seeing it this year. Like, oh, he's back. Oh, perfect to trade him. It's like I don't. It's such a weird dynamic. Like I really haven't seen that a whole lot in prospects over the years.
That's funny. Yeah, I think that's probably a reflection of just how many right-handed, like kind of center fielder but not center fielder outfielders there were on the same 40-man roster. Like I don't generally believe that like prospects block each other or that you should worry about too many guys at one position or whatever. But the time that it does start to matter a little bit is when they're stacked on the 40-man roster, especially when it's like there were 3 or 4 guys on the same 40-man this year that were not going to be called up to the bigs. Like they were not in contention to be thought about in Chicago, and they were all the same player type. Like that is a little bit of an issue. And so I think that's probably where that comes from. But yeah, I mean, he's also like a player capable of being a star, and you really don't want to trade those away. So the most important thing for the next month is that the Cubs really get their evaluation of him done. And like they believe that they know who he will be in 2024 and how that projects to 2025 and on. So there's important work to be done still.
All right, man. You want to talk about Jefferson Rojas here because I think it's time.
Yeah, so Jefferson Rojas is on an absolute heater. He's just the last couple weeks have been fantastic, but this weekend went to another level, had a game where he reached base 4 times, the front end of a doubleheader, including a home run. Then the back end of the doubleheader got on base 3 more times. Just an absolute monster. And I think, the thing that stands out is like every time we talk about him, we just have to say it's very important. Like your bash metric is based around it. This is an 18-year-old in low A who's succeeding 100 points in OPS above league average, 101 points to be exact, in a park that is impossible for right-handed hitters, especially. And it's just like none of it phases him. I mean, we talked about him a couple of weeks ago. I remember saying like he's just a guy that impacts a box score every day. Like he's a special player that I don't think has like quite had that stretch yet to explode on the prospect radar like nationally. I don't think he's getting like the full hype yet, but like believe that it's coming because what's happening is super rare. It does not occur very often for an 18-year-old to approach an 800 OPS in low A, especially at the shortstop position. So it's really cool stuff. And yeah, I guess he is who the people who told me this offseason that were the most optimistic, like he is who they hoped he would be.
Let's talk bash because I have the leaderboard pulled up in front of me here. So bash is a number that I developed last offseason that basically what it does is it's very, very similar to what we see with WRC plus that's used all throughout baseball. But bash also takes into account ballpark metrics or ballpark factors, and it also takes into account age compared to his peers at that level. That's not something WRC plus does. So with bash, basically if a guy has a bash of 130, like that is elite level stuff. Like that's really, really tremendous stuff. Last year PCA and Matt Mervis were right around 130-ish. This year PCA is at 127. Moises Ballesteros, who the entire year long has been really, really strong at the plate and really young for his level, Ballesteros has a 135 bash. Jefferson Rojas, based on like a decent number of plate appearances, Jefferson Rojas is blowing the competition away in terms of bash. He's got a 142 bash. So 130 is elite. Jefferson Rojas is 142. That is that's 7 higher than Ballesteros, who's number 2 in the system, which is pretty significant for my metric, where like it doesn't go as like WRC plus, you see numbers of like 165 and stuff like that. That doesn't really happen with bash. Jefferson Rojas has just been on another planet, dude.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like Bash doesn't even account for position,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
he's a shortstop. Like Bash is an offensive metric, so like I would imagine if you ran that for the whole minor leagues, like he's probably top 3 in shortstops across all of the minors in that metric.
He's checking every single box, right? Like he's a shortstop.
Yeah.
He in terms of the scouting side too, right? He looks good. So like not only metrics and all that stuff, like he looks good. So he's got shortstop. He's got looks good at the plate. He's got that he's young for his level. He's got that he's playing in a pitcher friendly ballpark in a pitcher friendly league. Still putting up good numbers overall. Like even if you just looked at his like slash line, just overall, right? He's batting 272 with a 354 OBP and a 434 slug. Like that by itself, striking out less than 20%, walking just shy of 8. Like if you just looked at the numbers just by itself, he's still having a great year. Then you throw all the other things on, it's like, oh my God, like this is incredible. So yeah, I don't know, dude. Like we're talking about Matt Shaw's like, oh, is he your number 3 prospect in the system? It's like I think Jefferson Rojas is having a conversation, or he's in the conversation of top 5 in the system, don't you think?
Yeah, I think he probably is. I mean, I think he'll probably fall short of it, but I do think that the odds that he is going to be the top prospect in the system someday before he reaches the major leagues are super high. I think the other thing to remember with him is like he's still growing. He grew a ton at like the second half of 2022 going into 2023 physically, and the Cubs are going to have him in Arizona even more this offseason. Definitely going to like get him in the weight room. I think they see a real chance to develop the power to be a more of a threat for him. He could have a just ridiculous breakout next year. He could, absolutely finish the season in like top 30s of national prospect lists, which is pretty crazy territory, and not something you can say about a lot of the guys who will be ranked above him on the Cubs list this offseason. Like his ceiling is higher than pretty much, I don't know, everyone but Alcantara and, maybe PCA.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's some serious stuff if you're throwing him in that conversation for that. So let's stick in Myrtle and let's go to the new age Bash brothers. And that is Jonathon Long and Brian Kalmer, who are corner infielders, which actually so real quick before we start getting into the numbers and getting into what we're seeing from Jonathon Long and Brian Kalmer, it's interesting that they were drafted as a first baseman and third baseman, but they have been playing opposite positions than what they were drafted as once they've reached pro ball. That's interesting. I don't know. It's not notable, I don't think. It's just interesting to me,
Yeah, I mean, I get the Cubs just clearly trusting their scouts above anything else there, and just going with the projection that those scouting reports had for them. I mean, just 2 guys that are just doing their job right out of the gate. And, I think this Pelicans team has been on such a fun run lately. Like they got a little shorthanded there in July, and we're starting to limp along a little bit. And then this influx of the draft talent mixed, like I think it's just given energy to that whole team.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some guys that have been there all year that now just look re-energized, and it's a team that keeps having come from behind wins, keeps having walk-off wins. It's a really fun time.
Three straight walk-off wins last week for the Pelicans, and they've been a fun team for so long. I love having the Pelicans in the organization. So we'll stick on Bash here a little bit because obviously a small sample size here. But with Jonathon Long and Brian Kalmer, those guys are first and third in the system in Bash this year. I know I said like a 165 Bash doesn't really exist. Jonathon Long has a 155 Bash in 53 plate appearances. So
really
small sample size. But when you're hitting 295 with a 1.006 OPS. It doesn't really matter how old you are if you're a college guy playing at low A.
Yep, fair.
And so actually the top three in the system are Johnny Long, Matt Shaw, Brian Kalmer. So, and Brett Bateman after that. So all four draft picks from this year are leading the organization in Bash so far. So that's really fun. But you want to talk about go into a little bit more detail on Long or Kalmer first here?
Let's do Kalmer, I guess. I've seen a little bit more of him just from sort of when I've watched their games. He started with Myrtle Beach first. You know, I don't know. What's interesting to him or about him to me is just like really unique batting stance that's sort of like his shoulders are so closed off to the pitcher and holds his weight back really sort of deliberately and well. But it like almost looks like a guy who like you'd expect to be someone who just cheats and like looks to pull the ball constantly, but we haven't seen that. Like he goes oppo a decent amount too, so it looks like a real like professional hitter. I've been really impressed. The Cubs like went heavy on these hitters with closed batting stances, and I don't really know why yet. It's something I want to ask about this offseason. But Kalmer is the most extreme of that by far, and he's really impressed me. He, you know, we said this about Matt Shaw, like not looking overwhelmed in a box. Like he's totally that way.
He's got that funky toe tap at the plate, and I'm not sure how that will ultimately play as he continues to climb the ladder. I'm a little worried about him using that as a timing mechanism. It's kind of wonky, but the whole stance is a little wonky. You're right, like how he's kind of closed off. He's hit really. He's batting what 350 something this year. He's batting 352 this year. Now the BABIP is like outrageously high, so like there's a little bit of luck there. But he's also hitting the ball really hard too. So like the BABIP's going to be higher when you're hitting the ball hard. He's a guy he's just too advanced for the level that he's at, and you see that a lot when a guy from college gets assigned to low A Myrtle Beach right out the gate, where he's just he was facing tougher competition in college. So in some ways, I guess Kalmer maybe not quite as much because he was over at Gonzaga. Gonzaga is a good program, but the competition wasn't quite as hefty as some of the Big 12 type guys and stuff like that, SEC guys. But yeah, man, it's fun to see him and just making a lot of contact too. Good quality contact. So yeah. And then with Jonathon Long, we'll stick on kind of the batting stance thing here a little bit. I got a text from Sam Wiederhaft, who's a broadcaster of the Pels this week, and he goes, "Tell me I'm crazy." Like he didn't say that, but he was essentially he goes, I think I'm seeing a little bit of Chris Bryant in Jonathon Long's like batting stance and swing. He goes, "Am I like seeing something wrong? Like what's the deal?" And so I pulled it up, and I right out the gate, I was like, like maybe, I don't know. I kind of think so. So then I pulled up a side by side, and I was like, dude, I see some KB in the swing, like big time. It's more than anything, it's the follow through where he kind of lets go with a high release with one arm. That's the KB. But Sam went and tweeted that the side by side videos of it, and it's pretty spot on. I kind of love it. Now this is not me making a Jonathon Long is KB argument, obviously, but like it's just fun seeing that side by side.
Totally. Yeah. They both get into that knee bend a little bit too. I was worried with Long about the bat speed, just like on the videos that I saw. And even like the home run highlights we saw from the Arizona Complex League. Like, you know, I think when those videos went around Twitter, everyone was like, oh, like how cool is this? And I watched the videos and I was like, oh, that bat speed still looks a little slow to me. He hit a ball the other night and the Pelicans on their Twitter posted the video of it. Like it didn't look slow at all. Like he caught up to a pretty quick fastball, pulled it for a home run. So that was exciting to me. Like that's one where I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not like pegged in on my evaluation on this guy. Like I need to get in the lab, watch a little more video and make sure that like the take I have on him is correct, because like the way he's performing suggests that if I'm trying to easily throw like blanket weaknesses on him, then I'm probably wrong.
Like the 100 Cubs pitchers in the organization, you need to get back into the lab.
Yes.
Who is your I don't think that either guy we should or can put expectations of that Hayden McGeary, Matt Mervis, BJ Murray type breakout for a later round draft pick.
Yeah.
But I guess who are you liking? Who are you liking a little bit more from those two guys right now? I guess, is there a guy, or are you just enjoying the ride so far?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I'd probably say Kalmer just because I've seen more of him. That sample's a little bigger of success. But Michael Carrico just got to Myrtle Beach and hit a really fun looking home run
I
this
like
weekend
Michael
as well.
Carrico, dude. I like
So
him.
that might be the guy that ends up jumping out in this final month as much as any of them.
I'm saying Michael Carrico fan club meets once a week, so
And it's right here.
I was gonna say it might be on this show. Yeah. Oh, geez. I'm curious to see how long he's in the organization, because as long as he's in the system, we will be talking about Michael Carrico right here. So, all right. We said that this episode wasn't going to be as long, and here we are, 45 minutes in, and now we're talking about Pedro Ramirez, who, I mean, it's a pretty clear as day before and after with Pedro Ramirez here. It is his time when he was up in Myrtle Beach early in the year before he got sent back down to Arizona, and then when he returned from Arizona up to Myrtle Beach, just night and day stats. So in his 101 plate appearances before being sent back down to Arizona, he had a 220 batting average, a 280 OBP, and a 275 slug. That's bad, bad, and bad. 25% strikeout rate, 6.9, which is not a nice walk rate. Just not good all around. He went back down to Arizona, came back up, I think it was like 2 weeks later, 2.5 weeks later. And when he got back to Myrtle Beach since then, over the course of 265 plate appearances, he's got a 274 batting average with an on-base percentage of 370, a slug of 429, striking out less than 16%, and walking more than 12%. I mean, that is at our kind of like our biggest hopes for Pedro Ramirez coming into the year. That was the line that we were like hoping for would be the best possible outcome.
Yeah, and he's played a really good third base too in the games that I've watched. Does a really good job there. I think long term you'd like him probably more at second base than you would third base, but just the fact that he's been able to sort of make that work as the year has gone is really intriguing. I think we can forget that it's really hard for these guys who have sort of lived on complex, like their entire baseball life for a few years has just existed in the Cubs complexes. Like when you leave that bubble and you go into sort of the real world, both in professional baseball and just like in American culture, like that's really tough stuff. And I think if we're going to forgive any type of hitter for their first couple months of performance, it should be that type of guy, right? Like the guy who's experiencing sort of a new city in a new country for the first time. And so I'm like very willing to sort of throw that away. And like the rest of the numbers is just like Pedro being the same exact guy he was in the Arizona Complex League last year. Really similar numbers, really similar skill set. Just a guy who covers the plate extremely well and is really, really comfortable with two strikes. Like he'll get down there and he just like there's no panic. There's no pitch that he feels that he can't get his bat to, but he also has a really good understanding of the edges of the strike zone. So like one of the better young two strike hitters I think the Cubs have had in a while.
I'll throw one more situation out there. I really liked what you said about kind of throwing out the first kind of couple months or however long when you're experiencing life outside the complex. Another thing is that pretty consistently every single year, pitching down in the complex leagues is extraordinarily bad.
Yes.
It's really, really bad for every team every year. And so these guys, no matter their talent, are very used to being wildly successful down in the Dominican Summer League, even down in the Arizona Complex League. And then you get up to Myrtle Beach where low A pitching is still not great, right? I mean, pitching, the difference in pitching you can see just tuning in and watching. You don't even have to be, you can be hashtag not a scout and you can see the difference in levels of pitching from the complex to low A to high A to double A to triple A. I think that once you get up to Myrtle Beach, it's just different, and so you gotta adjust to facing like real life pitchers that are actually competing to climb the organizational ladder and not just getting things figured out as a pitcher down in the complex league. You know what I mean? And so that's an adjustment period in itself.
And yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, the time of year that low A pitchers are at their very like most difficult is the beginning of the year, because that's when you get a lot of those older college picks that were like sort of day 2, day 3 guys. They get assigned to low A because their organization has a bit of like a high A log jam, and then they pitch way too good for low A and they get promoted to high A after like 6 weeks. Like that happens all the time. And so I think the hardest time for a hitter to hit in low A is the first 6 weeks, which is also sort of overlapping with this cultural thing. Like it's sort of a perfect storm nightmare situation for these guys. And, you know, it's one that I think we can lend a little grace to, especially when we start to, I don't know, talk about how to think of them as a prospect.
Yeah, I'm loving what I'm seeing from Pedro. And I think that last year, he became a little bit of a fan favorite. Just being that kind of small, scrappy looking second baseman, third baseman, infielder. And we saw him for a little while play. He was playing up the middle in the complex leagues with Christian Hernandez, and he was playing a little bit of shortstop too, and all that good stuff. So, I think it's fun. It's fun when Pedro is good, and so I'm glad we've seen this over the past few months now. That's been fun. So
the Cubs are going to have such a hard time, like limiting the number of South Bend infielders next year to a manageable number for that like manager to play. I mean, they're going to have like, oh man, I mean, we can talk about like just the Myrtle Beach guys, right? You have Jefferson Rojas, Christian Hernandez, Pedro Ramirez, Rafael Morel, Rivas Garcia, not to mention like the corner guys like Long and Kalmer. Then you go to South Bend, like Josh Rivera is going to probably end up there. Ed Howard probably stays there. It's just insane how many guys there are going to be.
That is rough. I hadn't even put much thought into that. That's rough. Yeah, they're going to have their work cut out for them there.
Yes.
Huh. All right, man. We ended up spending longer than we expected. That's how it works when we're talking about very top prospects like Brian Kalmer and Jonathon Long. Is there anything you want to plug before we wrap up?
No, not really. Let's just let's keep getting some call ups here to the major leagues. Let's get Pete Crow Armstrong and Luke Little in the next couple weeks, in which case then you'll be able to read some extensive breakdowns about them at Bleacher Nation that I'll write. And yeah, let's have these young guys help us get to the playoffs. That'd be super fun.
I got to ask you. So you had your, I mean, you always do your what to expect for all the prospect promotions up to the big leagues. Yours on Jordan Wicks was, as always, terrific. How do you put those together? How far in advance are you starting up those articles? How much of it is, oh crap, like it's happening, let me throw this together? Because they're always like, honestly, like probably my favorite reads every single time it happens. How do you assemble that?
Thank you. Now they have a little bit of like a almost sort of a structure in terms of like, this is the time I write about what they look like in a uniform. This is where I write about like what they've done in the minors and stuff like that. So the sort of format of it is already sort of done in my mind. So I wait until I hear the player is going to be called up, which, you know, sometimes we're lucky enough to find out a day before it happens.
Sometimes the world is lucky enough to know it's happening with Jordan Wicks a week before it happens. Yeah.
That was very kind of them to have him skip that start and then wait a couple days. I don't think it'll be quite as easy with Luke Little. Like, I think that's one where, like, if you told me tomorrow he got promoted, I wouldn't be surprised. If he's not promoted until, I don't know, September 20th, I won't be that surprised either. Yeah. But the Pete Crow Armstrong one, I think I can share that one's in a draft already.
I figured. I would hope so. All right. You can follow Brian on Twitter at Cub Prospects. You can follow me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can listen to the show wherever. You can subscribe on the Northside Bound YouTube page to see our beautiful faces. And yeah, subscribe there, comment, leave a rating, all that good stuff. We really appreciate you guys doing that. Honestly, like the Northside Bound YouTube page has grown quite a bit over the course of this season, and it's been pretty much just posting this podcast on the YouTube feed. So thank you guys so much for tuning in there. Thanks for all you guys' support. And in the meantime, we will be back in your ears in one short week. Thanks, guys.
Go Cubs.
Yeah.